Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today we'll talk about Europe's most tragic helicopter accident. It features one of the more recognizable helicopters, an aircraft better recognized for its military use, although this particular helicopter was used for transporting passengers. So what exactly transpired to cause such a catastrophe? We must learn more about that specific helicopter and take a deeper look at how it operates. In Shetland, there are about 23,000 people. Sumburgh Airport, on the southern extremity of the islands, connects the island cluster to the rest of the globe despite its remote location. Typically, this airport offers flights to and from a number of the nation's major cities. However, it also serves as a center for helicopter flights to access and depart from offshore oil platforms. The oil field that Shetland shares with the United Kingdom and Norway is easily accessible thanks to its location in the North Sea. Aberdeen is another Scottish city with oil-filled helicopter flights. In 1986, British International Helicopters was the company in charge of these flights. British Airways helicopters had recently relaunched, and the helicopters had a British Airways livery. Oil platform workers took these flights as expected. In 1986, BIH used a Boeing CH-47 Chinook helicopter. This helicopter, which first flew in 1961, is unique because it has two twin rotors instead of the single tail rotor standard in this aircraft type. The helicopter is a typical general-purpose and transport aircraft in militaries worldwide. It can be modified for the transportation of passengers or freight. British International Helicopters found the Chinook effective for their operations, even though it's frequently linked with military use. The Chinook does have a variation for civilian operations. These aircraft have been made over 1,200 times and are still being built today. On November 6, 1986, the CH-47 Chinook G-BWFC was to make multiple trips between Sumburgh and the Brent oil field, located northeast of Shetland at 61 degrees, halfway between Shetland and Norway. The UK subsidiary of Shell Corporation runs the oil rigs and platforms out here. The disaster flight took off from Brent Platform C that morning and was the first trip back to Sumburgh. Position north 61 degrees, 5 minutes 46 seconds, and east 1 degree, 43 minutes 18 seconds in coordinates. Instead of Aberdeen, this plane's pilots flew to Shetland. For 3 days, they've transported workers to and from Brent. Captain Push Vaid, a 45-year-old pilot with 10,000 hours of helicopter flight experience, was one of those pilots. His co-pilot, Neville Nixon, a 43-year-old veteran helicopter pilot with just under 5,000 hours of flight time, joined him on the flight deck. The co-pilot switched shifts with another pilot and flew that morning instead of the afternoon when they were both scheduled to fly. The ride there and back was unremarkable. At 10:22 in the morning, the helicopter departed Brent Platform C after the turnaround. 44 travelers enjoying a break from their offshore jobs were on board. There were 47 passengers on the aircraft, including one flight attendant. The airplane flew at a comfortable altitude of 2,500 feet as it returned to Sumburgh. To analyze the helicopter's technical breakdown, we should start at the time of the disaster and go backward. The Chinook came in from the north. They would land on Sumburgh's smallest helicopter runway, 24. The helicopter was cleared to land 4.5 miles from Sumburgh at 11:30. The cockpit voice tape shows the pilots hearing a whining sound followed by a loud boom. But what exactly had happened to this helicopter? The term turboshaft engines is frequently used to describe helicopter engines. These engines are different from those in airplanes in that their primary function is to spin the rotor blades rather than generate propulsion. The two sizable rotors on the top of the CH-47 Chinook, as was previously established, give it its distinctive appearance. The engine of this helicopter is situated close to the aft rotor in the back. The internal gear mechanism of the rotor must convey engine energy to the blades. The helicopter's gearbox is connected to a spinning synchronization shaft. The Chinook has two enormous unique rotors, hence it has a forward and aft gearbox. This shaft is used to synchronize the two rotors. As a result, rotor collisions are avoided. A more thorough examination of the forward transmission is required. The accident report refers to this as a spiral-beveled ring gear. Although the gear is shown above from the top, it rests on the engine-driven synchronizing shaft. Using that energy, this gear propels the large rotor blade up top. Let's find out why they failed. According to the accident report, the attachment flange on this ring gear experienced circumferential fatigue cracking, which caused the gear to break. A groove, possibly from corrosion and wear and tear, had compromised the gear. Exposure to water and oil are two other causes of corrosion. According to the accident investigation, the helicopter's low-altitude flight over the sea and time on oil rigs exposed the rotor's inner mechanisms to rust. The accident report states, this resulted in the commencement of corrosion fatigue cracking, which propagated downwards through the flange. As a result, the groove's creation was related to fatigue failure. According to the research, the aft transmission never experienced the same level of wear and tear as the front transmission. The forward transmission set's gearing system may have caused the pilot's whining noise before the catastrophe. Even though the pilots observed it, they weren't alarmed. To prevent a collision, the two sets of rotor blades were synced. Damage to the forward rotor assembly threw it out of sync. Rotors colliding caused the disaster's tremendous explosion. As you can guess, the helicopter lost control at this point. The injured forward rotor was still attached and whirling, but the aft rotor blades had already separated from the plane. The helicopter's front began to tilt up. The helicopter sank first as the aircraft's rear sank. By adjusting the power controls on the plane, Captain Pushp Vaid made an effort to land it. Typical conditions would have caused the helicopter level to rise. According to the flight crew's only survivor, the helicopter's structural integrity failed in this injured state. The aircraft's front end toppled over, exposing the cockpit to the water. The helicopter's breakup caused the cabin to fall first, absorbing most of the impact energy, followed by the cockpit. The incident occurred shortly after a Coast Guard helicopter conducting a search and rescue training exercise left Sumburgh. They arrived on the scene quickly. Only one of the 44 passengers survived the helicopter ride. Captain Pushp Vaid had also survived, clinging to some floating wreckage after escaping the submerged and sinking cockpit. Neville Nixon, the co-pilot, and another flight attendant had also passed away. One of the deceased bodies was missing and assumed to be dead. Conclusion. The Sumburgh disaster went on to rank as Europe's deadliest helicopter accident. It's also among the deadliest events to have taken place globally in terms of the number of fatalities. The investigation concluded that the crash was solely caused by mechanical failure. Additionally, it was found that the pilots could not have done anything to salvage the helicopter given the accident's severity. As a result of a single component failing, the twin rotor blades became out of sync, which eventually caused a collision. Due to the incident, British International Helicopters adopted more rigorous maintenance procedures. Captain Pushp Vaid, who survived, went back to flying helicopters only a few months after healing his wounds and passing his medical tests. Despite the incident, he insisted that the Chinook was the best helicopter he'd ever flown. In favor of Sikorsky helicopters, British International Helicopters retired the model. Since then, there have been no tragic accidents involving the airline. Regarding the Chinook helicopter, it's still made today in many variations. Due to its usefulness, it's maintained its favor among international militaries over time. The use of the helicopter in other activities has now been reduced to a great extent. That's all for today's video. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon to stay tuned.